Sponsor today, and our social worker probably is going to thank you for 14 new people that you can talk to after the meeting after a So let's move along. We've got a great program for you today. David Brooke is here, and David has been speaking, teaching, and coaching for over 30 years. As that gratitude guy, he specializes in helping people to achieve anything through an attitude of gratitude. One of his many tools he utilizes is a daily gratitude journal. Spreading the word of gratitude is a key component in his life's journey. So I'd like you to welcome David Brooke.
Please don't start on that wine just yet. A few things to say. Let me start by asking a couple of questions here. Several people have referenced gratitude knowing that I was speaking today. And I want you to think for just a second about what's happened when you felt down or depressed. Or what happened when you thought about, is this all there is to life? And what happened when maybe it wasn't working out quite as you wanted to? And two, most of you here are business leaders, you've got businesses, employees, responsibilities, but what happened when it didn't work out? Or maybe let me ask you about this. Think about the worst day of your life. What happened? What did you do? How did you get through it? What were the tools that you used? Let me just read something, if I may, regarding the worst day of a person's life. September 29th started like any other day, except after I called her name throughout the house, my wife didn't answer. I found her lying on the floor in the downstairs laundry room in the pool of blood. After rushing to her side, I realized she was not breathing. I called 911 and immediately started CPR. She never regained consciousness, and I was left with two young sons to forge ahead in life as a widower. The pain is something that will be with me forever, but what saved me in the long run was my belief in gratitude. Survival gratitude. Well, that person was me. And that was 12 years ago. And how do you go from the worst day of your life, and that's why I asked you to think about yours, to 12 years later having an Amazon best-selling book, 365 Days of Gratitude? It certainly doesn't happen overnight, and it's something that is piece by piece. And I think it was Carol, memory serves me correctly, to talk about reframing or refocusing your life, and that's part of it. So when you do that, it's a step-by-step process, but it can be done. So I'd like to tell you a couple of brief stories, if I may. Shortly before Dana died, well actually 5 or 6 years earlier than that, I had started a business, and it became very, very successful. It was an auto detail business. It's just me in the beginning. I'd been at Nordstrom prior to that, wearing the fancy suits and the shirts and ties and looking like $1 million. And here I am starting this little business, and I'm smashing my knuckles, and there's blood and water, and it was just ridiculous. And I started to really question what I was doing. But I stuck with it, and soon enough, in a few years, we were working 7 days a week, 300 cars a month, $500,000 a year, very, very successful business. And then, unfortunately, Dana passed away. And not only did I lose my business, but I lost my house, I lost all her money, she had taken it all out, she had died of a prescription pill overdose. Very, very nasty type things that people die of these days, which is why gratitude has become such a healthy, productive way to reframe and refocus your life. But as that taught me that lesson in building that business, rather, I thought about, I graduated from the University of Washington, and I've paid a lot of tuition in my life, but building that business over 6 or 7 years was a tuition I paid that just didn't happen to go to a school. And it taught me extremely well. But the key there, before I really started to understand the power of gratitude, was sticking with it piece by piece. Now, I don't know if many people here have run a marathon. I've run one and only one marathon. And let me tell you, 26 miles was a long, long ways. And these people that run it these days, I don't understand it. I mean, I was running, little kids were going by me, and I didn't quite understand it. But what I did understand is you got to break it down into pieces. And it's got to be bite-sized pieces that you can understand. And this is something you can apply to anything in your life when you got to get reframed, refocused, or back on track. And I remember thinking, let me just think about a mile. Let me just think about a trip around Green Lake. I live down in Seattle. That's 3 miles. Now I've got 4 miles under my belt, and I won't think about it because the enormity of it is too much for you in many cases. And so when you think about that, going back to that worst day of your life, or some of those really, really tough times, I'm going through a very, very tough time right now. You don't have to be somebody who's had their head in the sand to see what's going on. If you read the paper, listen to the news, listen to the radio, and you know what's going on. But I think as I look back on it, totally what saved me through that, losing that business with all that money, I had to close the business. I was so depressed after Dana died and dealing with all the economic and social and raising the boys and so forth. It was gratitude. And gratitude is what saved me. So next I had 2 young boys I had to raise on my own, 4 and 14, when Dana died. And Connor would come up to me every day, where's Mommy? And it was something that was really tough. I'd lost the business, out of work, the money was gone, lost the house was gone, and here I am, and they're going, where are we supposed to go now? So you start now, and also at the same time, of course, they're going to school. What about PTA? What about Cub Scouts? What about the meetings and the things at the school that you have to deal with? What about the practices? You want them to play sports. And some of you may have gone down this road before. It's very challenging when you want to be the best parent in the world and you can barely get out of bed in the morning because of what's happened to you. So I started thinking about that as well, and again, it occurred to me, when you get depressed or you get down, it's not something many people talk about, especially men, because it's something that is very, very personal, and people don't usually want to admit weakness. But when it's tough like that, I started thinking the same thing. What can I do? What's going to be able to help me? And I realized again, it goes back to breaking it down into pieces. I remember a few years earlier, I'd had a cord of wood delivered. And I remember thinking, you know, I don't need 1 cord, I need 2 cords, so I'm a cool guy. And so if you've ever seen a cord of wood, they're 4 by 8 by 4, so you can picture it. And I come home and the driveway is stacked, as high as that screen. And I just, good Lord. And so I got to put it in the basement. And I started working on it. I got slivers in my fingers, and it was raining, and it was just horrible. And I was working on it for an hour, nothing had changed. It looked exactly the same. And I just went in and I sat down and I said, oh, good Lord. But then I kind of reframed, that's why I love that what Carol said. I reframed and refocused and brought it back. And I started thinking, okay, here's the problem. You're cold, so let's get a thermos of coffee. Let's get these slivers out of here. Let's get some gloves on. Let's get a hat on. Let's get the radio on there. Let's get some music going on so you're not really thinking about it. And just get your little tail out there and start working on that wood again. So I'm like marching back and forth, and I'm taking the pieces of wood back and forth. And lo and behold, about an hour and a half later, it was all inside. And hadn't even really thought about it. But I also thought back, when I've listened to several people today reference gratitude, that was wood that was going to be making the house warm. We had a big fancy house. And I started thinking back then again, why aren't we more grateful? And I thought, I got this neat house, and I'm complaining because I got some slivers on my fingers. And so gratitude, once again, came to the rescue and saved me. Then I had another situation that may or may not be a little closer to home. The majority of people in this room are probably bosses or had bosses. In fact, I read a survey recently that 3 out of 4 bosses everybody's had have been not good. In fact, just poor or mean or what have you. And I had a boss like that. And it was brutal. I'm one of these people that I'll raise my hand. I've never missed a day of work in my life. And I'm always on time, and never late, never leave early, and all those kinds of things, and take long lunches. But this was as tough as I'd ever seen. And I was running a big operation, and I would talk to this individual pretty much every day. You're worthless. I need somebody to get in and take your place. You don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you got this job here. And I would just hear this day in and day out, and I think, what is going on here? I mean, it really, really attacks your self-esteem. And anybody that's ever been in a relationship that's not as good as it could be, or a relationship with a boss that's not as good as it could be, you know what I'm talking about. And when your self-esteem gets attacked, you've got to get reconnected with that person in the mirror. And if you don't, it's going to be trouble, and you're going to start doubting yourself. And so I thought, again, what will I do? How will I step back and look at this? Because if I just leave, this individual wins. So I once again drew back on something that happened to me in the past. And yes, it had to do with gratitude, but it also had to do with breaking things down into pieces. My brother and I had started racing hydroplanes. And so we got this hydroplane, and it was really exciting, and we got this fancy motor and everything. There's lakes all the way up to Canada, all the way down into Oregon and so forth. And we go up to talk to people, nobody would talk to us. And they just walk away from us because we were the new kids. We didn't know anything. And then we kind of won a heat here and there, and then once we won a race, one person kind of waved to us and everything. But it was about a 6-year or 7-year process where we went through this, and then we started finally getting better and better and better. And in the end of the 7th year, we were the national champions. And we were the best boat out of 350 boats in the country. And we had to swat the people like flies away from us who are our friends now. What kind of product are you using? What kind of motor are you using? And I thought about all those races, all those busted knuckles, all those things that had happened along the way. And I realized that once again, you've got to break things down into pieces, and you've got to be grateful for it. So I think that as I look back on those episodes in life, life can be extremely overwhelming. I was saying to, I want to say Anna, no, maybe it was Barry. I was saying that Barry's not quite 30 yet. And I was telling him, I said, Barry, I wish I was your age again. Gosh, it's gone by so fast. And, well, Ken, I'll see, Ken, you're not yet 30 either. So, but it's flown by, and I thought, what are we doing to cope in this world? For goodness gracious. I lost a wife to prescription pills. I've seen many, many friends go down with drugs and smoking and drinking and all this crazy stuff. And that's when I really started to understand the power of gratitude. And what I sort of moved into is a personal gratitude journal. And that was mentioned at the beginning. That's something it's more than just talking about it, because you have to really embrace it. And one of the things I've always said is that I've learned to be very grateful, but I didn't always record it. And that was part of the challenge, and it really, really started to stick with me. And I realized if you think about it, it directs you. If you talk about it, it inspires you. But if you write about it, it empowers you. And it's the empowering that's really, really critical. And I think that in 7.5 minutes, every single day, you can completely reframe, refocus, and change your life. And I understand there's a lot of demands for our lives. Yeah, I just need 7 to 8 minute abs, 3 minutes to do this, 6 minute chicken breast for the, just set it and forget it. There's all sorts of things that just demand a few minutes. But this goes back to each of you individual people sitting here. Again, as a person, as a boss, as a spouse, as a parent, whatever your role, somebody mentioned that earlier, whatever your role is, think about the time you take for yourself. And do you have 7.5 minutes a day? Because it'll transform your life, and it's completely transformed mine. It doesn't happen overnight, which is why I wanted to remind everybody of the sort of the piece by piece. But I think that what is interesting is that, let me just tell you about this gratitude journal for a second. This is one from The Secret. I just developed my own. It's coming out on Amazon in 2 weeks, called the Brooker's Daily Gratitude Journal. 7.5 minutes to transform your life. Here's an entry from a couple days ago, just opening up. Left-hand side, gratitude today. Everything you're grateful for this very moment, today, this sunny day, whatever it might be. The one on the right, called Gratitude Intentions, I also call it Gratitude Tomorrow, is what you're going to be grateful for. Because your mind does not always understand what you think is actually going to happen, and it really does happen. As long as you're planning it. Everything I'm grateful for tomorrow is going to be written here. I've timed this 100 times, 7.5 minutes. And that's all it is. And it'll completely, completely change you. And I think that it's important to understand, to ask yourself, this is a very personal question, are you the person that wants to transform your life? I come across people all the time. Doesn't matter what issue it is, it can be the drinking, all that kind of stuff, weight, whatever. I'm going to get it squared away. But it's been my experience, I've managed a lot of people in my life. I currently manage 150 people at the operation I run right now. And I used to say 1 out of every 20 will change. I think it's now 1 out of about 50. Because it's, well, I was going to do that. I'm going to get to it. So I always like to challenge people. And the same with everybody in this audience today. Are you that 1, or are you that 49? Because people, when somebody is passionate about something, they tell you, Joe, I think you should do this. Sally, I think you should do that. Do you ever really think about who's telling you that? I mean, if you want to learn how to ride a bike, you should ask Lance Armstrong. But we asked the kid down the street who skinned his knees and fell off. Or I noticed that I'll go to one of these casinos, not often, but I'll go to the casino just to gamble. And you ever notice how you get the most advice from the guy with the least amount of chips? I never understand it. You need to fold on that, you hit that, you don't have any chips. And the guy over here is to himself. So think about who you're listening to. In fact, when you think about can you really change, I really challenge you to think about a couple things. If you hear nothing else I say today, think about the worst day of your life and think about what you did about it. Think about how you got through it. And then think about, are you that 1 or are you that 49? I mean, it's interesting because it's a good question. People will tell you they're that 1, but in many cases the numbers are kind of against them. I had a young lady that worked for me, told me she was going to change. So it was way back in the detail shop. Really, really sweet gal. But she had a tough life. And I think she may have been a stripper. I don't know. I don't know the whole back. It was, once again, I have no personal knowledge. I'm just saying I heard that. But I think that it wasn't the best family situation. And she was polishing the cars and everything. And it just, I felt so bad for her. Her life had never really turned around. So then she gets pregnant by one of the other guys that works there. So it just wasn't a good situation. She was probably 25. She goes, David, Mr. Brooke, I can't remember what she called me. I'm moving to Texas. I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to clean up everything. I'm going to change. And I'm going to get this whole thing figured out. You can count it. I'll call you. Because my mom's down there. She's going to help me. I'm going to have the baby down there. So 6 months, 8 months went by. Get a call. It's her calling from. I actually forgot about her. I changed my life. Completely changed it. And I said, well, what happened? Had my baby. Okay, what's his name? Or her name? Bobby. Something like this. That's fantastic. Have a new guy in my life. So that's fantastic. So I've changed everything. Great. What's he do for a living? Well, he's on work release right now. But I think that I'll never forget that. Just thinking, gosh, because it's hard to change. It's hard to change. So when you have to face life, there's a lot of ways to cope. And having lost a wife to a prescription pill overdose, and a lot of friends. My doctor just died recently of a heart attack, same age as me. It's tough. You don't know how people are coping with their life. But I'm going to submit to you that gratitude can make a gigantic difference. And this little 7.5 minutes a day can completely change how you frame and refocus your life. Reframe, I should say. But I think also something that I did is with this book. This went out on December 15th last year, and 2 days later became a bestseller in the self-help category with Amazon. And goodness gracious, I never would have thought in a million years that something like that would have happened to me. But it has completely changed me. There are 365 individual stories here throughout the year for every single day. And if you don't get a tear in your eye on some of these things, it'll surprise me. Because what I've noticed is that when you share it with somebody else, we all have good friends, hopefully. We all have people that are close to us. But you've got to share it with people to really understand the quality. And it magnifies the experience and helps you pull through. And if you think about when something, I mentioned the worst day of your life, when you think about something that really good happens to you or really bad, who's the first person you call? That's going to tell you who your friends are. That's going to tell you who you're close to. Because it makes a big difference, because that's the first person you want to share it with. And I noticed that when you look at these stories and you see what other people have been through, it really, you're able to share it with them, and they got through it. And in some cases they'll tell you how, but in most cases it's all around gratitude, if not completely. I remember a long time ago, I was flying. I've been a pilot for a long time. And I was down near the Astoria, Oregon coast. And I got in between, and many pilots here, being in between cloud layers, instrument flight rules. And somehow I got stuck between layers, and I was like, what's going on here? I don't even know if I was flying IFR. I think I was flying VFR, which is visual flight rules. And all of a sudden, it was like these colors started just coming over and under the plane. And they're just flying at me. I was going 150 knots or so. And they're just flying at me. And it's just like, oh my goodness. In every color in the rainbow. And it was just over and under, over and under. And it was just like hanging on for dear life. And then I came out on the other side. whoa, man, that was something else. It probably lasted 45 seconds long. And I looked over to next to me and I went, wasn't that really good? Oh, I was flying by myself. So nobody will ever know that story except me. And I can't share it. So when you share gratitude and when you share stories, and whether it's between each other or hear about what other people have been through, it will reframe and it will refocus. And when you think about, I think what's happened in this life is this drug situation. I don't think people can manage their emotions. I think that's maybe a lot of what it is. Take this, do that, whatever. But reading stories like this, writing in a gratitude journal every single day will make a gigantic difference. There is no way I could have come from September 29th, 1998 to this day today. And I'll just finish the rest of this passage. The thought of trying to raise my 2 young sons and to survive the trauma of losing my wife is only made possible by my belief in gratitude. I started to write in a gratitude journal, and each day encouraged me to focus on all that was good in my life in spite of this horrific event. The human spirit can survive, but it helps to have tools to assist in the process. They say that time heals, and it does, but gratitude can truly propel you to a life of renewed happiness and joy. So again, I ask you, are you the one or are you the 49 to try something like this? It's in a world where we have such a tough time coping, it seems. This is something that can transform you. And again, what happened to me in these last dozen years is unbelievable. And I'm no bigger, better, stronger than any of you sitting in this room. But if I can do it, you can do it. And I promise you it'll make a huge, huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much, David. You know, we have all experienced the last 3 years, and as business owners and community leaders, we need to be the one that are out there kind of carrying that torch and moving on, and I think this ties in really well and hopefully gives us some tools to do that. So thank you so much. He was very humble. David actually runs our local Lowe's hardware center over here, and is just a great asset to our community, and just a gem. So if you need to find him, that's where you can find him. Also, I'm sure you have to say Amazon a couple times. We have a couple great local bookstores here in town that you could also purchase that book at. So I have to say that. So. And we also, I think he's got some in the back. So, and you can probably get a sign. So we also want to thank you again, Mark, from Express Employment Services. For sponsoring our luncheon today, and next month, don't forget, September